Welcome back, everybody, to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I'm Nick.
I'm Devin.
Yeah. Welcome to a very special episode.
Super special.
Super special. Super duper special.
There's going to be so many sound effects.
I really just need like
lasers.
Yeah, 100%.
So why is this a special episode?
Thanks for leading us into that, Devin. Uh-huh.
Why am I looking for duty-free party music?
That's really funny. It is our 1 year episode. We've officially had this podcast for 1 whole year.
Isn't that insane?
It's kind of disgusting in the best way. It's kind of crazy, like thinking back on a full year of recording this podcast.
Yeah, and like where we started, and now we're here.
Now we're here.
Just
Started
a little
from the bottom. Now, right here is where we are. Right. No, I mean, I think it's been a really exciting ride. I know that I think we talked about this in the very beginning of the podcast, where we kind of said this started like offhandedly, very drunken conversation. Oh yeah. I was like, what if we? And you're like, shh, it's okay. It's okay.
It was at a bar during a St. Patrick's Day parade.
Where all the best ideas come from. Hot dogs being sold in the parking lot. Right. Yeah, it was a wild time. Anyway,
JB Pritzker was there.
What an insane day. So this is where we are, and this is the baby that came from that St. Patrick's Day night. Many have. Yeah, and many will continue.
Fair.
Right. But I just wanted to say thank you all for sticking around and helping us and supporting us and continuing to listen to us just banter and conjecture about wild, crazy things that have happened in the world, or dupe the other one with fantastical things and programs and stuff. And so it's been a really fun ride thus far. And I know that just being able to come out here and hang out and chat with you is something that we've always loved to do. And so now we get to do it for the peoples, which is exciting.
We get to make everyone else suffer.
Yeah. Master planned at work.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We've gained a following.
Yeah, small but mighty.
Cool,
yeah.
To see everybody returning each week to listen to us tell you something new.
Yeah. And I appreciate everyone kind of engaging, whether it's liking or subscribing or commenting, especially the comments. Hysterical. Absolutely amazing. We talk about it all the time. So continue to do that. Tell your friends. Tell your peoples. We really appreciate you. And Dev, cheers. I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you. Here's the 1 year.
Yeah, baby. So, very special episode 52. We're in a year. Cheers. We are also, coincidentally, not really, but at the beginning of Pride Month. Oh, yeah. This episode will come out June 4th. So it's the very beginnings of Pride Month.
Take your word for it.
Yeah, baby. I know calendar things. So with that being said, we're going to get into a little bit of the month that is. I wanted to celebrate my peoples and the peoples that you ally with. And so I will ask the titular question, and then we'll kind of dive into it about a little bit. Have we done a person before? Other than Alicia's episode, have we done like a biography? Not really, right?
Well, you did H.H. Holmes.
Oh, true.
So like, there's that,
and that wasn't that long ago. That's concerning.
Oops. Have we done a person? I've been thinking about that. That's going to be like my change. Is like I want to get into the people of these grand events, but I don't think we've done,
because Devin's here for the people.
I am. Okay, I'm here for you.
I'm here for you. So anyway, so today we're going to get into a person. So Devin,
we're going to get into a person. All right.
Yeah.
Clear this table off.
What do you know?
Yeah.
About J.C. Leyendecker?
J.C. Leyendecker?
Mm-hmm.
I assume this isn't the same JC of NSYNC.
Yep. Correct.
So I'm going to say nothing.
You might know his artwork more.
Okay.
And I'll show you some of his work in a minute. Sure. But he's more popularized through his work, I think, than his name, unfortunately. But
it's kind of typical for
artists sometimes. Yeah. Unless you're like super
Dolly,
or Rockwell or something,
right?
So let's dive into it. It's a cool story. It's one that kind of, I would say, kind of got pushed aside and kind of forgotten, and recently has kind of come into a little bit in and out of out of notoriety when it comes to especially the linkage to gay and queerness. And so today we're going to be talking about him and his life and his artwork.
Cool.
And kind of what that meant in the world at the time.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. So his name was J.C. Leyendecker.
Great.
Also stood for Joseph Christian Leyendecker.
Okay.
So he's one of the most prominent and financially successful freelance artists in the United States.
Wait, say that again?
He is one of the most prominent and financially successful freelance artists in the U.S.
No shit, and I just don't recognize it.
No, I was like,
well, that makes me
like, why? Because
terrible.
He's gay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, what do you mean by your people were celebrating? Are you gay?
This is the episode I come out to. Yeah. Even though you've been to my full wedding. Yeah.
Yeah, I stood up in your wedding.
He's like, I would never assume.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what Brian's deal is.
Right. I don't know what you label. I don't think about labels. Right. Yeah.
It's beneath me.
Wild. So he is one of the few known gay artists working in the early 20th century.
Oh, okay.
So he was born March 23rd, 1874 in Montabaur, Germany. He was born to Father Peter and Mother Elizabeth, and also had a brother Francis Xavier, or Frank, and later had a sister. I'm going to get into her name. I'm just not quite yet. So I'm not going to just like write her out from history. Yeah. Her name was Augusta Mary. Anyway.
Okay. Thanks.
So like
panicking getting her name.
Yeah. So I'm like F, Control F. Yeah. So his brother Frank was born 2 years later in 1876 and would actually go on to study and illustrate alongside of and with JC.
Oh, that's cool.
So they were both really kind of prominent illustrators at the time. JC just more notable.
Sure. And
so in 1882, the Leyendecker family immigrated to Chicago.
Oh.
So Elizabeth's brother, Adam Ordesfine, was the VP of McAvoy Brewing Company, located actually in the South Loop.
Okay.
So it was one of the largest brewing companies in Chicago before Prohibition. It closed in 1820 due to the 18th Amendment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which is crazy. Which means they were in Chicago for the World's Exposition.
Everything comes back to the World's Exposition.
Everything comes... The lines are being drawn.
Did you know that means they were there for the invention of the Ferris wheel?
I fucking hate you.
I have to. It's called a bit.
The other big announcement for today is that this is the last episode of the podcast as well. Just because of that. So
worth it.
Worth it. So shortly after arriving, the family had a daughter, Augusta Mary. See, I told you it was coming.
I believed you.
And your eyes didn't. I saw them. So in 1890, J.C. apprenticed at the J. Manns and Company, which was a Chicago printing and engraving company at the time.
Okay.
So he worked his way up as a teenager from apprentice to staff artist. I mean, it's crazy that people were like, yeah, I did all of that. I don't know. It was just like a very different time. Not to say that people don't do that now, but I was like, you could just like fuck high school and go start working and then become a prominent person by like 22. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just, anyway. So.
And then just be able to stay within one company and work yourself up to that instead of having to, jump to different companies every 2 years.
Right, exactly. It's fine. We don't need to jump into our resumes. So he worked his way up. And after becoming a staff artist, Leyendecker would go on to work on couple of things. 60 Bible illustrations for the Powers Brother Company. He did the cover and interior illustrations for the Interior magazine, which is kind of like an interior design sort of magazine.
I figured.
Yeah. Did the name give it to you? A frontispiece art. He did frontispiece art for the Inland Printer, which I didn't know what frontispiece was, but it's like when you open a book and it has the title page kind of on the right-hand side, then there's sometimes artwork on the left-hand side.
Oh, yeah.
That's frontispiece.
I didn't know that was what that was called.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is just more book art.
Right. Well, I saw it offhand and I was like, I was thinking like the cover. I was like, why wouldn't they just call it cover work?
Cover art.
Cover art. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh, because it's not cover art.
That's cool.
Yeah, now we know. So he did posters and book covers for Chicago publisher E.A. Weeks. He also did marketing material for men's clothier Hart, Schaffner, and Max. So Leyendecker was a very active member of the Chicago art scene as well at the time, where he participated in social events and exhibited works with the Palette and Chisel Club, the Art Students League, and the Chicago Society of Artists.
Okay.
December of 1895, some of his poster work was actually displayed in the Siegel Cooper and Siegel Cooper and Company department store, as well as the Kimball Cafetiere, which was kind of like I think it was like an interior design firm sort of situation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so while working, Leyendecker also took night classes at SAIC, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Okay.
Which is crazy to me that school has been around for so long.
Right?
So long.
So many great artists have come out of it, and it's just like, it's just long historical. I don't know. I could talk about the Art Institute forever, but it's all right.
On the next episode. Yeah. It is very cool. It's, oh my God, my aunt-in-law. Yeah, aunt-in-law. I also works at the SAIC.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's awesome. So after taking numerous classes, especially drawing and anatomy from John Vanderpoel, who was best known for like human figure drawing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one sounds familiar.
He has a book called The Human Figure.
Oh. Oh, right.
Yeah. Duh. JC and Frank enroll in the Académie Julian in Paris.
Oh.
Yeah, they go to Paris.
Baguette.
Exactly. And I wonder, so they go to Paris, and what's interesting is, if you remember, the Beaux Arts movement is happening, right? Because that kind of influences a lot of the World's Fair, which happened in 93, and this is 95. So just afterwards.
Yeah.
And so, but we move from Beaux Arts into like Art Nouveau, and like that's the time they're kind of getting settled in. So we talked a little bit about that, but I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder if some of that styling from the World's Fair influenced them and then kind of shifted them to Paris in a lot of ways.
That would make sense.
Right. So they studied from October 1895 to June 1897.
In Paris.
In Paris.
Okay.
The two of them. So during the time in Paris, Leyendecker continued to work for companies back home. So he provided art to Hart, Schaffner, and Marx, which was the clothier. He did artwork for 12 covers in the Inland Printer. He even won a contest for the poster and cover of the Midsummer 1896 issue of the Century magazine. So it's actually one of his prominent works as well. It's like the August issue. It's a very beautiful, like Art Nouveau, oranges, this woman, I'll show it to you in a second.
Okay.
In a bit. And so Leyendecker won out of 700 entries.
Oh, wow.
I was like, damn, that's impressive. This garnered national media coverage and became one of his most famous pieces. So studies at the Academy in neoclassical under a couple of different teachers. So Adolphe Bourgeonneau, Jean-Paul Lorenz, and Benjamin Constant. And apologies for the accents. Throwing it out there now. I'm like, someone's going to be like, that's not how you say that. And I'll be like, yeah, I get it. Although the classical trainings were occurring by day, the Leyendecker brothers were also immersed in the Art Nouveau movement happening at the time, especially seen in poster work. So,
like Le Chat, like the Black Cat.
Kind of, yes.
Chat Noir. Sorry, yeah.
Along those lines. So you have like Jules Charest, you have Mucha, you have Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, or Lautrec, whatever.
Yeah.
So their work, this is Charest. So like that's my thing is that
the Moulin Rouge poster.
Yeah. So actually, Toulouse-Lautrec is most notable for his Moulin Rouge posters and his work for there.
The dance line.
And then Mucha is definitely very Art Nouveau. Like a lot of these depictions is kind of what you can see influenced by Leyendecker. And so like when we even
and like that stuff, a lot of that imagery to me looks like absinthe bottles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And so it is very cool because this really influenced them at the time. And you see that in his, in Leyendecker's work.
Oh.
This is J.C. Leyendecker. But like this is that Century magazine contest he won. Like very Mucha, very Art Nouveau, all very of that. Very much so. Yep. So that's what they were influenced with at the time.
Okay.
Is they're in Paris, they're gallivanting about all of those things and kind of associating themselves with these people.
Yeah.
Right. And so these kind of three artists, of course, popularized poster work at the time with famous pieces recognized today. These artists' work and art movement absolutely influenced Leyendecker. as we just saw. So at the Academy, Leyendecker's work had won 4 awards. One of the paintings, Portrait of My Brother, was exhibited in the Paris Salon Champ du Mars in April 1897.
Okay.
So the Salon was the official art exhibition of the Académie des Beaux-Arts. At one point, it would have been considered the greatest annual or biennial art event in the Western world.
Oh, okay.
So, like, at the time, huge.
Yeah.
The fact that his painting was displayed there, incredible. So, another artwork of his posters for Hart, Schaffner, and Max titled The Horse Show was exhibited as part of the award-winning display of American manufacturers' posters in the Exposition Universelle. Or however you say that in French, 1900. So the 1900 Paris Exposition or the Paris World's Fair. Mm-hmm. So all of that was their time in Paris. Mm-hmm. So about a year, they're there about a year and a half, maybe a little over a year and a half, and they've done a lot of
they're just like cranking out work. And
well,
that's crazy.
That's the crazy thing is that like they don't come from a lot of money, right? Like they don't have like family money, things like that. So they're working to kind of fulfill and going to the academy and doing all those things. And so it's interesting to see his work start with like the Century Magazine piece and like really influenced by Art Nouveau, and then kind of where that leads as he continues his work down the line.
Definitely.
Yeah, and how it shifts and develops through, right? Yeah. So the brothers returned from Paris in summer of 1897 with an apartment in Hyde Park and a studio in the Chicago's Fine Art Building.
Oh, it's cool that they came back to Chicago.
Yeah. I love the Fine Arts Building. It's one of the only operated elevators still.
Oh, really?
It's cool. Oh. It's a lot of fun. I had vocal lessons in that when I was younger, and so you would get. Okay, why don't you shut the fuck up? And so you would get in, and it's just always so awkward because like you don't tip the guy, right? But it's like you get in, and he's like, "What floor?" And then there's no. The doors are on the floor, right? Yeah. They're not on the elevator. So you're going up and there's nothing between you and like the wall, and it's crazy. It's fun. I like it. Anyway.
Plus like you were young. And right. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm awkward.
I'm like 16 and like,
Nick at 16.
Yikes. We don't need to go into that. So Leyendecker continued to work for Hart, Schaffner, and Max while also creating artwork for a little company you might have heard of, Carson Pirie and Scott. That's what it was called at the time. Carson Pirie Scott? Nothing? Carson's?
Yeah. Like J.C. Penney?
Yeah, but Carson's?
Carson's?
Yeah, but all right. It went from
oops.
Oops. I mean, it's not around anymore. But it was Carson Pirie and Scott, and then it became Carson Pirie Scott, I think. And then I think we just colloquially called it Carson's. Yeah. So he worked for them.
Oh, wow.
Thank
Crazy.
you. Jesus. Eastern Illinois Railroad, Northern Pacific Railroad, Women's Home Companion Magazine, yikes, Stone, the Stonecutters Jade Journal, Carter's Monthly, The Osprey, The Bird Hobbyist Magazine.
Hell yeah. Let's go.
I'll get you one of those. Conan Doyle's Micah Clark and Octave Thanet's A Book of True Lovers, and 132 Scenes of America for L.W. Yeage's laptop panorama of biblical scenes titled Royal Scroll.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That rolls right off the tongue.
Love a laptop panorama of biblical scenes.
Like
it sits on your lap.
Not
like a laptop.
I was like, whoa. Early 20th century laptops.
Yikes. Moving on.
Go ahead.
May 20th, 1899, Leyendecker receives his first commission for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, which will be the launching point of a 44-year association with the magazine.
Oh.
So this magazine at the time was huge. Like it was the biggest media. Like, everybody got and read the Saturday Evening Post. It was massive. And so Leyendecker would go on to produce 322 covers for the magazine.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Good for him.
The Hagen Museum states, quote, Leyendecker helped define the modern magazine cover as a unique art form, a mini poster whose design rapidly communicated its message. His covers were animated by people and themes that resonated with his audience because of his ability to capture and convey a range of human emotions and situations in his hallmark style of wide, crisp, and controlled brushstrokes accented by bold highlights, end quote. So kind of just like redefined and kind of set the stage for his work, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of even just like front page newspapers. Now we have them all splashed with pictures and photos and things to grab your attention, but it was just so blocky with text. Like even looking at the Chicago Fire newspapers, it's just like a wall of text and like a little thing about the Chicago Fire or like whatever kind of thing. It's interesting to see this movement too, having these works of art, literal works of art, grabbing your attention.
Well, and I think I talk about it in a bit, but this is kind of the golden age of illustration. And so you're coming out of these points where it is just kind of newspapers and it's just text because all we got is a printing press, to now that we can do illustration in a wide format. People are really leaning into it.
Now that we have laptops.
Have you heard? So yeah, it's interesting. And he really kind of leads that in America, of just kind of being like, this is what a cover is to a magazine, and this is what it should look like, and all of those things, which is cool. Insane. Yeah. And so in 1900, the Leyendecker siblings moved to New York City together, and the brothers continued their illustration careers in books, magazine covers, posters, advertisements, and the study, and with a studio in Bryant Park Studios. They couldn't do it from Chicago.
You can do so much from Chicago. I understand,
but like they had to go.
Whatever. Go on.
I know.
One strike for you, JC.
JC. And Frank. And Frank. You forgot about Mary, Augusta Mary.
Is she going with them?
Yeah, they're all going together.
Oh, I didn't know it was all three. So sorry.
All three, the siblings. So Leyendecker became somewhat of a specialist in illustrations of men and earned him his reputation after illustrating for men's product advertising, pulp magazines, and college posters. Okay. So he kind of course, his covers for the Saturday Evening Post are a gambit of different like sectors and things. Of course. But he really kind of leans into his illustration of men and for different products, right? Yeah. So major clients of his at the time were A.B. Kirschbaum, which was a Philadelphia suit maker, Wick Fancy Hat Bands, Gillette Safety Razors, E. Howard & Co. Watches, Ivory Soap, which... I have to show you this photo. So if you look at this photo, do you notice anything about the guy?
He... one, it looks like he's wearing monk robes. Two... I don't know. What are those circles?
Oh, those are just, I don't know, some sort of pattern. Do you notice the large erection underneath his robe strings?
Oh.
Which you don't until it's pointed out to you. You think it's just kind of like shadow or fall. Yeah. And so that's kind of begins some like fun little nods and codes that he gets into.
All right, good for him.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty impressive. Like, my God.
Artist interpretation.
Right. 100%. So, Ivory Soap, Williams Shaving Cream, Caro Corn Syrup, and Kingford's cornstarch. I know. Interwoven Socks, KB Kuppenheimer and Co., or just B Kuppenheimer and Co., excuse me. Cooper Underwear, which is now Jockey. And Cluett Peabody and Company. So Cluett Peabody and Company was the maker of Arrow brand shirts and detachable shirt collars and cuffs. And this is kind of where he gets his bread and butter, is through Arrow as a brand. His partnership with Arrow brand shirts would go on to be his most notable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think just the few examples that you've shown me of his work where he's able to get such fine but like soft detail, that's great for design. Clothing design.
Well, and what's interesting is that before this, and I think I have a note about it, but anyway, so before this, a lot of male depictions, especially like in clothing and things of that, it's just rigid, right? It's flat, it's one note, it's kind of boxy, like it's just, this is clearly two-dimensional, right? Leyendecker comes out and he does a lot of work with light. And everything's kind of like candle lit and glowing. And there was a body underneath the clothes. And that's what became so notable, that it wasn't just, oh, I can see that that's a suit and that's how it'll look. Now it became, this is a person wearing this suit through illustration.
Yeah, this is how it'll look on me when I wear it. This isn't just an item I'm looking at. This is something that I can visualize, like looking at a mannequin when you're at the department store.
Correct. And that's what kind of became so notable. And other things that we'll talk about, but what became so noticeable about it was such a you got a 3-dimensional, and that kind of was so new to the world of men's clothing illustration.
Yeah. I think that's what I was kind of wanting to get towards by saying the soft detail was saying there is a body on there. There's that. You can touch it. And
there's a documentary short that I watched. It's like 30 minutes, super quick, and it's about J.C. Leyendecker and this one woman, which was kind of... It's a weird thing to say, but I kind of understand what she said. She was like, every picture, because she was really leaning into the gay thing, but she was like, every picture was like a nude model. And the reason she said that was because you can see the form underneath the clothes. And so you kind of have that kind of depiction and detailing of the male figure, even though clothes were on top of it.
I was
like,
that.
I get it. I was like, okay, calm yourself.
Right. Who knows if he actually did drew them all naked and then just threw some clothes on them or whatnot. But.
Right. But I thought that was, it's interesting. And that's kind of, had he not gotten this partnership, it probably wouldn't have given him the same notability that he has now.
Yeah, for sure.
So the male models who appeared in his illustrations for Arrow shirt ads from 1905 to 1930 were famously referred to as the Arrow collar men.
Oh, okay.
Or the Arrow collar man is kind of what it was.
Yeah.
So the Arrow collar man came to define the fashionable American male during the early decades of the 20th century. While many different men served as models for Leyendecker, and many go on to have successful careers in theater, film, and television, one really stands out. So those initial models are Brian Donlevy, Frederick March, Jack Mulhall, Neil Hamilton, Ralph Forbes, and Reed Howes. They're older actors, obviously, so like no one kind of big notoriety that I think we would know, but still they had very prominent careers at the time.
Even if they were prominent actors today,
yeah,
I wouldn't know them.
You know, literally nobody. Very concerning.
My head in a hole with the ostrich.
Said, hey, buddy. So it was Charles Allwood Beach that would be his most prominent and his lifelong partner.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So in 1903, the Canadian-born Charles A. Beach came to Leyendecker's studio looking for modeling work, and Leyendecker became enamored. Beach was tall, fit, perfect model, and as Leyendecker continued to use him for modeling and as the main influence for his Arrow collar man, a relationship formed and flourished. Beach, being the more business-minded of the pair, would eventually actually become Leyendecker's manager.
Oh, that's a little controversial, but okay.
Why is that controversial?
I don't know.
The subject becoming the manager. Yeah, that's fair. It's all tied up.
Yeah.
This is early 20th century. Yeah. They don't know about all these things yet. So in 1914, the Leyendeckers and Charles A. Beach moved to New Rochelle, New York, where they purchased a large house and studio. And when I mean large house, I mean a 14-bedroom house with a separate studio and large garden estate.
I figured. Right. It's New Rochelle in that time period.
Right. Remember Ragtime?
The song was sang in my head, and I hated myself for it.
I knew it. The minute
I hated moving that house because the crew was too small and weak. So me and Matt, the football player that did musicals, had to shove the house into place.
That set was so unsafe.
It was. It was terrible.
It was so unsafe. Just to give everyone context, Devin and I in high school, it was junior year, and our theater director, decided to do Ragtime, which was very strange because the high school that we went to was
mostly white,
prominently white. And so finding people of color to play the very racially driven show of Ragtime. Anyway, not the point of the story. But our director definitely felt a very kind of longing for Broadway. And so the set was quite grand, but we didn't have the funding or the structure for that. Like, I played Harry Houdini and came down on a fly system. Yeah. Like, as a high schooler coming down on a fly system, ridiculous. I also almost passed out in that fly system.
You sure did.
Different story. But the sets were very unsafe, and they'd be like, okay, sing and dance on this set that would shake back and forth as you sang and danced on it. Quite a fun time.
Because a normal class would build the sets during the 40-minute class period.
Right.
And there was like multiple classes of set building. There was maybe like 3 set building classes in a day. And so like you would just have different groups of kids go in there and building these sets for you. So it was It was interesting.
There was one that was like a platform that folded out.
Yeah, it was
a boat that then folded out into a boardwalk. And it was like 3 feet wide, not even.
I thankfully didn't have to walk.
It was like a balance beam. Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah,
anyway.
I think I had to put like that glow tape on there, and I was like, I don't want to go up there.
No,
but I had to move a lot of these set pieces. Because the crew just wasn't able to get these massive, like there just wasn't enough of the crew to get these massive set pieces where they needed to go in time. So that was fun. I was just like in a tweed suit pushing a house on its mark.
And like, you might be thinking like, oh, it's like the outline of a house. Like, no. This was like a two-story house.
Like
that
4 or 5 rooms. Yeah.
It was disgusting. Like, it was like 4 rooms and an attic or something like that. Yeah. Horrifying.
And a porch.
Kind of for like 2 weekends of shows. Yeah. Like,
not even 2. It was 1 weekend of shows.
We
wild. Didn't have 2 runs. It was always 1 run.
So it's 1 run.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. It was quite the experience.
It was a good time.
It was a good time. Yeah. Anything. It's an anecdote.
A learning experience.
It's a memory.
Yeah.
100%. So, they moved to New Rochelle. And that's a place in the show, right?
Yeah, they sing a song, I think titled New Rochelle. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hysterical. So, and if you'd guessed it, that's where the rich white people came from. So, JC...
And everything was ragtime.
Episode close. Oh, okay. So JC and Beach would live in the house through the end of their years. See?
Great.
Isn't that nice?
That is nice. That's it. Wait, that's the end of the story?
No.
Is there more? Okay.
No, there's more. I'm just saying, they lived in there for,
They're not moving anywhere else.
Home.
Okay.
Yes.
Good for them.
Yeah. Bless their hearts. At the time, J.C. Leyendecker was making millions a year, and his brother Frank had a prominent career as well, meaning maybe not millions, but very close, which is insane that an illustrator at the time was making so much money.
Yeah, that's
right?
Awesome.
So since modern advertising had come into its own, Leyendecker was widely regarded as among the preeminent American commercial artists. The golden age of illustration artists were celebrities. It just was. You know what I mean? Like, it was the it's kind of what drew everyone together, right? It was ads, it was all of that. And so, and going into the, late 10s into the roaring 20s, you kind of have this uplift of parties and lavish and all of that.
Right.
So illustrators that can
all
do
of
that.
This,
that grandeur.
This extravagant stuff, yeah.
So Leyendecker was seen hugely popular, and his fame found its way into his personal life, where Leyendecker and Beach would often host huge Gatsby-like parties and galas for people of consequence from all sectors.
How could you not in a 14-room house mansion?
Right, in New Rochelle.
Right.
Exactly. So along the way, Leyendecker met Norman Rockwell, who asked Leyendecker to be his mentor. The influence of Leyendecker's work can be seen in Rockwell's, especially in his early years, some even calling it the superficial Leyendecker.
I could see that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't say superficial or whatever, but I could see the influence.
So
I don't have an opinion to call it superficial, but I see the influence.
I say it a little bit nicer here, where while Rockwell establishes his own notoriety and the best-known visual images of Americana, in many cases they are derivatives of Leyendecker's work or reinterpretations of visual themes established by Rockwell's mentor.
Yeah.
Right?
I get
so
that.
It's not... Superficial might be a little harsh, but there are a lot of, so he ends up illustrating for the Saturday Evening Post as well. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of his early works that are kind of like, if you were to show his and you were to show Leyendecker, you'd be like, Leyendecker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just following the brand.
Right.
You're keeping within the brand image of everything. So
and I think get that. If you're someone who's changing the game, like, of course, you're gonna find derivatives of that work and other people's work. Yeah. I think it was just kind of clearly with him as a mentee of Leyendecker, he never kind of fully split off from the kind of the visuals that Leyendecker was presenting.
Okay.
He kind of just furthered those with his own style.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and he obviously went on to do paintings versus just kind of illustrations for cover or commercial work, right? So, The two became good friends, and the Rockwell families moved to New Rochelle. And Rockwell's family actually moved to New Rochelle, helped the mentorship kind of relationship.
Okay.
Rockwell would go on to illustrate covers for the Saturday Evening Post, like I said, with 323 covers. Damn. One more than Leyendecker. It's like, you
just had to get
bitch. You bitch. So in the midst of the parties and rise to societal fame, unfortunately, Frank was battling depression and poor health due to his drug addiction. And in 1924...
Oh, no.
In 1924, Frank died at the age of 48 of a morphine overdose, which was seen as most likely a suicide.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yikes.
So when the stock market crashed, I also want to say really quick, I'm going through kind of the chronological timeline of things,
sure.
But then I want to jump back to the kind of prominence of the Arrow Man and kind of what that meant for the time.
Okay.
So I want to get to that and go back to that, but I just realized that like I didn't want to skip over that. We are going to go back to that. So when the stock markets crashed on Black Tuesday in 1929, this marked the decline in Leyendecker's career.
Makes sense.
So by 1930, 1931, Cluett, Peabody & Co. ceased using Leyendecker's illustration in its advertisements for shirts and ties since the collar industry seriously declined.
Yeah.
So while the Great Depression was happening, you also have to remember that there was a societal shift back to the basics. So one could not afford the extra, and that was both material, right? I couldn't afford food and extra clothing and a house and all of these things, but also the personal. So kind of queerness was pushed back into the closet with more raids and less acceptance. And, you know, in the 20s, you kind of had acceptability of queerness at parties and social gatherings and things of that nature. And I get into a little bit more of that, you know, in a bit. But you kind of had this, it was just lavish and grandeur and a party. And so anything went. You know what I mean? It didn't matter, you know, who you are, what you did, who you wanted to be. It just, you were who you were, and that was what was happening at the moment, right? Then you have the 30s where everyone kind of scaled back and fell back on kind of old, basic kind of concepts, and people stepped in to kind of take over that, right?
A little bit more conservative viewpoints.
Right, because people had to be not only fiscally conservative, but then again, to your point, like you kind of shift into this, you know, societal conservative nature as well.
Looking at the church to help you out. We all know the church has been all anti all that forever and ever. So it's like,
amen. So exactly. And so not to say that Leyendecker was not given commissions due to his gayness, like there's no evidence of that, but the world had shifted and Leyendecker was associated with the previous one.
Yeah.
Like his artwork was associated with a work and a time of prominence and like excitement and all of these things, and now we just can't have that.
Yeah, and even if like he was drawing things to go with the times, like no longer the collars, potato sacks that people were wearing. Like if you were to draw that, people aren't buying the magazines themselves. They're not able to afford these works of art as a magazine cover.
He shifted himself so, and not to his own fault, but he was just such a commercial artwork illustrator, that unlike Rockwell, he didn't have anything else to kind of fall into, right?
Yeah.
So, in 1936, then at that point, the famous editor of the Saturday Evening Post, George Horace Lorimer, who obviously close friends with Leyendecker since he did so many covers for him, retired and was replaced by Wesley Winans until 1942, and then Ben Hibbs, both of whom very rarely commissioned Leyendecker to illustrate covers. So Leyendecker's last cover was January 2nd, 1943.
Wow.
So by this point, the already shy Leyendecker had become more reclusive and stayed in New Rochelle for most of his days and only really spoke to his sister and his partner.
Yeah. So
Beach was actually, Rockwell kind of talks to this a little bit. Beach was partly to blame in the later months of life, as reportedly he forbade outside contact with Leyendecker. So his isolationism from the world was kind of Beach. Charles, his partner.
Okay, so Beach is the one to
kind of isolate him, right? So I think there's two sides to this, right? I think that Leyendecker himself is already kind of shy and reclusive, right? And then I think really what happened was, I kind of interchanged Charles and Beach, but Charles Beach is his partner. I think he was angry at the world for the way that they were treating Leyendecker, right?
Okay.
He's not getting commissions anymore. People are kind of pulling out of contract, like all of these things. And I think he's angry, and so he just kind of wants to shut the world out.
Yeah.
And kind of, I think he thinks he's doing it to protect Leyendecker, and Leyendecker is reclusive and kind of shy and probably isn't being very vocal. I'm assuming that. But it kind of shuts him away from the world. Is kind of what happens. And so as towards the end of his life, we have World War II happening, and Leyendecker was commissioned by the U.S. Department of War to draw up recruitment and bond purchase posters to aid the nation's efforts. And he had also done this in World War I. He'd also done some war posters. So due to less and less commissions, that also meant less and less money coming in. And Leyendecker and Beach eventually had to let go of their house staff.
Oh, their staff.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, not the house.
Of course, not the house.
No, just the staff. But the two went on trying to maintain the large New Rochelle estate by themselves, which, okay, yes, they were very wealthy and had a staff, right?
Yeah.
But also very difficult for two people to maintain a 14-room house with a large garden estate. Do you know what I mean?
Just close 13 of those rooms.
Padlock them.
Yeah.
Throw some sheets on things.
Exactly. Make it look like Beast's castle from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, that's not sad.
What else are you going to do?
I get it. So coming out...
Mow the lawn yourself. You're fine.
So coming out of World War II, we had the beginnings of also McCarthyism happening, another attack on the queer community.
Yeah.
Right, because I think the 30s, we have this revert back to basics, right? World War II, all attention and focus is on the war.
Right.
Right? No one gives a shit who you are, what's happening.
As long as you're not a Nazi.
Right. It is the war.
Right.
That's it. But then coming out of that, you have McCarthyism, which isn't just, communism. You have an attack again on queerness and other, right?
Whoever's not the nuclear family.
Right.
Of white people.
Right. And this kind of is starting towards the end of Leyendecker's life. Obviously, unbeknownst to him that his life is ending, but towards the end of his life. And I say this to note some possible context for Leyendecker's decision in the end. Mm-hmm. So on July 25th, 1951, Leyendecker was outside lounging, having a cocktail, when he suddenly drops it and calls out for Charles. Leyendecker was having a heart attack, and as Charles runs out and reaches for him, Leyendecker passes in his arms.
Oh,
I know.
It's very sad, very poetic.
Sad. When I watched this in the documentary, I was like, don't weep. Don't weep. It was very sad, but very poetic. I mean, in their home, in their estate, very
after
sad,
a drink.
But right, but very, very kind of seems like calming. I mean, not a heart attack, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Leyendecker was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx next to his parents and his brother in an unmarked grave until 1956. I couldn't find why it was unmarked, but he was unmarked until the 56. And I don't know if that was Charles's choosing. I don't know if that was maybe
part of the practice,
of that.
Where it's this is just where the family plot is. So if you find another body here, you can just assume who's who.
Potentially. And so Leyendecker leaves the estate to both. And my assumption might also be with the McCarthyism and some of his decisions here in his will, he didn't, if something were to come out, he didn't want to be noticed or found or what have you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of it. And then by 56, his sister might have said, I think we're fine, right? Mark his grave, please. Yeah. So Leyendecker leaves the estate to both Beach and his sister to split equally, and everything's pretty fine. There's no animosity there or anything of that nature. But he does ask Charles to burn all of his artwork.
Whoa.
Because I think he had a fear. A lot of people lived in fear of being found out. So if something happened through McCarthyism and kind of this red scare of sorts and this violet scare, or velvet, whatever, violet scare, they wanted to make sure that nothing was traced back, I think was kind of his mentality. He didn't want anyone to be harmed or suffer because of his life. And so he asked for his artwork to be burned. So Beach ends up destroying some of it, but he also sells some.
Yeah.
I think he also understands the notoriety of his work can get him some money since he's not working. You know what I mean? It's a both situation. Right. And then Charles A. Beach also dies of a heart attack at New Rochelle on June 21st, 1954. And Augusta Mary is the last one left. So that's why I say, like, I think that after Charles passes, you see 2 years later his grave is marked. Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of like, I wonder if that kind of all of that mentality kind of centered together. But there was no kind of understanding for why his grave was unmarked at first.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But that's his life.
Okay.
So that's J.C. Leyendecker.
Yeah.
That's his life. Now we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of his legacy.
Okay.
And kind of jumping into a lot of notability, but also kind of the queerness aspect as well. Right? So during his prominence, Leyendecker also drew ads for Kellogg's cereal, especially cornflakes.
Okay.
Which I thought was cute. While drawing the Saturday Evening Post, Leyendecker introduced the world to many famous depictions and traditions, such as the New Year's Baby, which was his last cover.
Okay.
Mainstream Santa Claus. His depiction of a jolly, pudgy man in a red fur-trimmed coat is kind of the modern Santa Claus we know today.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it can be traced back to him. Also, flowers for Mother's Day. So there's a depiction on one of the covers of a young bellhop delivering hyacinths for Mother. And this cover would be published for Woodrow Wilson's Declaration of Mother's Day as a national holiday.
Oh.
And so that kind of... just little by little, it just kind of became, I'm going to get my mom flowers for Mother's Day. What a pretty picture. And then that kind of set itself in stone. And then firecrackers on the 4th of July. So on the 4th of July, there's a depiction of...
That bastard. My poor dogs freak out every 4th of the July.
You're just going to be cursing JC.
Son of a bitch.
Everything up until this point, you've been totally on his side. Yeah, until firecrackers. So the depiction is a kid lighting a firecracker under a policeman. So other things before I kind of get into the Arrow Collar Man, random things. His work influenced the graphics for the Dagger of Amon-Ra video game and Team Fortress 2. Do you know either of those?
Yeah. I do.
There you go. He also influenced George Lucas's Museum of Narrative Art, and costumes of Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire on AMC.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, most notable kind of things here. So, Beat Up Boy Football Hero, which is one of the covers of the Saturday Evening Post, was sold in 2021. I don't know why I said it like that. 2021 for $4.12 million.
Whoa.
Previous Leyendecker record was $516,000 in 1930.
Whoa.
So
That's a bit of a jump.
So there was a thing where, and I couldn't find this. It was in the documentary, and then I couldn't find it anywhere when I was doing some research. So I don't know if I might have missed it or something of that nature. But after his will had said to burn his artwork, Beach burned some of it, and then he sold some of it, right? There was also a case where there was another painter had rented out his old studio in the Fine Arts Building. And I guess there was like an attic portion, or maybe in New Rochelle. I think it was New Rochelle. There was an attic portion to it, and some kids were playing and went up to the attic and then found a chest in the attic. And the chest had a bunch of his work in it.
Wow.
And so I think that's kind of where we get a lot of his work as well, that we now have in differing museums and such. Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's depicted, I will say that's depicted in the documentary. I didn't see that in any other research. No one kind of noted that.
Sure.
They really just kind of leaned into the fact that Beach sold some of his work. So take with that as you will. I like the story of that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Which I think maybe part of that could be true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I wouldn't. It's not so far-fetched that one would say it's completely dramatized.
Right, because he died in 51, 54, Beach died, they're older. He's probably not going up to this little hatch attic thing, you know what I mean, right. And finding this, whatever. So I thought that was interesting. But because of that, I think that they weren't selling his pieces. You know what I mean? Other than like kind of in a little auction in New Rochelle. Yeah. So that's why 1930 is kind of the last time that we have this big expenditure on his artwork.
Right.
And then now today. So it's interesting. So in The Great Gatsby, because he's friends with like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zelda, things like that. I think his parties influence Gatsby. Gatsby itself there is a guy, Max something, that was influenced for the character.
Right.
But I think the Leyendecker parties were kind of what influenced him to write it, right? I mean, these things were massive, like huge parties. So Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby says, quote, "You always look so cool. You resemble the advertisement of the man. You know, the advertisement of the man," which kind of alludes to the Arrow Collar Man.
Yeah.
Because... So now we're going to get into the Arrow Collar Man, which is very cool. So the Arrow Collar Man, while the idea was brought on by Charles M. Conley, an ad man with the Calkins and Holden agency, Leyendecker is who brought it to life.
Okay.
Right? I do want to give Conley his due. Yeah, exactly. So the Arrow Collar Man was seen as the male equivalent of the omnipresent Gibson girl. So, you know the Gibson girl? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So the Gibson girl was being the personification of the feminine ideal of physical attractiveness in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the U.S., drawn by Charles Dana Gibson.
Right.
And Gibson and Leyendecker actually came together with, I think, a third artist to do a lot of the World War I posters together.
Okay.
The Arrow Collar Man was chiseled, detached, suave, and handsome. There was a body beneath his clothing, as we said, right? So most male depictions, especially in ad publications, were one note and rigid. We kind of talked about this already. Leyendecker gave gleam and structure and rigidity and strength, not an outline. So there's, quote, his work was selling not just a shirt, but the promise of urban sophistication. End quote. Yeah. Biographer Deborah Solomon. So the Arrow Collar Man's all-American allure, quote unquote, is said to have brought the company thousands of pieces of fan mail. So straight women wanted him, straight men wanted to be him, and gay men read between the lines that he was one of them.
Yeah.
So in many of the illustrations for the Arrow Collar Man, especially those with multiple subjects, we have the presence of gay or queer-coded messaging. So oftentimes two men would engage in a gentle touches or would be disinterested in the woman with them or looking past the woman and at the man on the other side of the room, even sometimes with a kind of a phallic item in hand.
The schlong on the guy wearing monk robes.
Yes. That thing is prominent.
It's only gay coded though.
Correct. That's actually it. Yeah. So one photo has a man sitting gripping a golf bag between his legs as he looks at his male friend, I have in quotes, across the way as a woman, seemingly his wife, plays with a dog between the two men. So there's kind of, when you first look at it, you have like guy sitting looking at other guy, you have wife in the middle playing with a dog, and then you have the other man there, and it looks like he's looking at the woman.
Yeah.
Kind of. But you kind of then read and you can see he's looking past her. But at first glance, if I wasn't looking for that, or if I couldn't if I didn't even think about queerness, I wouldn't see that. But it is kind of clear that they are kind of looking across from each other. So you have this kind of, and he has this golf bag between him that he's kind of gripping at the same time. You know what I mean? And so you see where this guy on the right in the blue could be looking at her, right? Your assumption is he's looking at this woman, right? She's playing with the dog, very nice. But then you can kind of see that they're actually more so looking at each other. The two men are looking at each other versus him looking at her. Yeah, and so you have a lot of these, or you have these moments of kind of close male intimacy in a lot of ways. He also did a lot of work with like two clothed men and then a third man in kind of athletic wear, maybe undressing or something of that nature. And you just have a lot of these kind of queer coded instances. And a lot of these are also depicted with Charles A. Beach as kind of the model there. I mean, even here you kind of have this like disinterest in the woman that he's with sort of thing, looking beyond, etc.
Yeah. There's I just keep going back to the descriptor of soft. Like there was just a lot of softness between the two men in depicting in the image. In the one that I think might be titled Two Men, I don't know, where they're wearing like tuxedos or whatever and they're sitting close to each other. It's just a gentle moment between two men that are looking very perceivably to be like masculine and whatnot.
Right.
Having a perfect high-end masculine image, just sharing a what one might assume be a tender moment between.
Right. And there's another one I was trying to find. I mean, there's even this one where he has this golf club that he kind of is gripping, but it could seemingly be stroking, and this man kind of looking on to the other. You know
especially
what I mean?
Where it's angled,
exactly.
It's like right at his crotch. So.
Correct. And there was another one, and I can't seem to find it, and that's fine. But there's another one where it's two men in tuxedos, and they're kind of looking at cufflinks in boxes or some sort of jewelry in boxes, and one kind of has a hand over, kind of peering over, and you just have these like soft moments of touch that, again, like you're not seeing it as, you know, this is clearly gay, but I think there's some element of I want to take who I am and bring this to messaging that people who are like me will understand when they see it.
Yeah, and I think too I don't want to put my own like message in his work or whatever, but like too, I think it is also kind of helping break down some barriers of this the modern hyper masculine image of what men should be. I mean, I think like I'm gonna bring it to Lord of the Rings, where like the men of that realm are just showing this tenderness to each other by like saying like crying with each other, touching each other, laughing with each other. Granted, like they're not having any queerness or gayness in it. It's just showing more of a tender moment between men, showing emotion. I think JC's art as well is depicting, while it is some of it is queer coded, it is also just showing that other side of being masculine, is also showing and not being afraid of a touch, an emotion of whatever.
I think it's a softness within masculinity, right? And
does that all make sense?
It does. Okay. I get what you're saying. I mean, I think it's a different version of masculinity that we know today, like toxic masculinity and things like that.
Right?
Like,
yeah, that's what I was getting
like
to.
Two bros chilling in a hot tub 5 feet apart because they're not gay, like that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
right?
You have this ability to bring homoeroticism into his work without it being perceived other than by people who would be able to see that, right?
Like if you know kind of thing.
Right. And like, again, like going back to men wanted to be the arrow collar man. Women wanted the arrow collar man because he's fit and chiseled and masculine and strong, but he's also having intimate moments with other men. And that kind of helps
the female gaze there.
Right.
Yeah.
But that also helps like straight men see I can have soft moments with a friend of mine, right? I can have these kind of intimate moments, and that's okay. There was no kind of, if you touch me like that, you're gay sort of thing, right? That wasn't there, and I think that he brought that out, but his messaging was to say, I see you, those who recognize this, right?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of those moments, and there's a trans black woman in the documentary who talks about how she's passing by and she sees other trans people and she's like, I want to like scream out and be like, hey, you know what I mean, like, oh my god, and like recognize you, like we're both out and about, you know what I mean. She's like, but I don't know what they're going through, I don't know other things, but there's little nods and little things that we do, you know, and you see that through kind of the gay community and even going into like the 60s and all of that, and like there's little codes and little, you know what I mean. I think about Alan Turing and like all of his chemical castration and all of that, but like there's just so much secrecy in messaging that kind of was already instilled in the community that then kind of just presented itself in Leyendecker's work that was so easy to pick up on if you were part of that community. Definitely, and I think he knew that, and that was the cool thing. Yeah,
and I think those, I might be talking on my ass here, but I feel like some of those signals that came in his artwork kind of continued on for future signals, like you were talking about throughout. I mean, especially like in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic and whatnot, when everyone was like, you can't be gay, especially. And I think people are just kind of like, here's the little symbol.
Right. Here's a little nod to you and me showing that I recognize you. And especially at a time where those opportunities weren't really present. You know what I mean? Without being kind of blatant, like there was no ability to, this was, again, the golden age of illustration. This was the first time that you really got the ability to, on a commercial level, kind of had these nods and nodes to, you know, the gay community. And so for him to be able to, whether it was super intentional and being like, I'm going to make sure that we recognize, or if it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of situation, it was still incredible that he was able to do that,
right?
And that it was able to be so notable, right? He's the most successful freelance artist in the U.S. at the time,
which is crazy,
right? Like, he's a celebrity, and he's able to create things that everyone in the U.S. loves and gives him so much credit for. And be able to say, I see you, and you see what I'm doing, and it's a little wink and a nod, right? Which is cool. I think it's really awesome. So, a couple of notes. We're wrapping up. I got excited. So, on the surface at the time, and I would even say today, any straight or unknowing person might see it as an innocent photo and think nothing of it. But for those who could see through the general and were used to secrecy and coded messaging, the homoeroticism basically slaps you in the face.
Yeah.
When Leyendecker first comes to New York, it's also it's kind of the close of the Oscar Wilde trial, where Wilde is sentenced to 2 years of hard labor camp for being a homosexual.
Right.
So you're already entering a space that's kind of in fear.
Yeah.
Right. At 19, I think 14, he's coming in. We're leading into the 20s where we see some more acceptance, but still it's on the quiet, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing the criminalization thereof still. And so there's clearly a fear of those finding out who you are and the criminalization as a person. So secrecy and hidden messages and signals were embedded in the community. Although during the roaring 20s, queerness seemed to flourish, especially in New York. So parties and extravagance and acceptance allowed queer people to be open and find comfort in spaces, from lesbian social groups to drag queen and trans performers to Leyendecker and Beach living lifelong partnerships and hosting lavish parties. Right. So unfortunately, we have this ebb and flow of queerness and its prominence within society. Right.
Still
we have the
today.
Still today. And I even say it's important to continue speaking to the way the LGBTQ plus community lived and recognized one another, even in times of fear and persecution.
Yeah.
We've come a long way, but still have a lot more to go for everyone under the umbrella. And so, again, like, you have this like rise in queerness and its acceptance in the 20s, and then you have this drop because of the Depression, and then you kind of, no one really gives a shit in the 40s, and then you have, the 50s of McCarthyism, and then you have kind of the 60s where it's still, the 50s and the 60s, and
you get kind of into the hippie movement where like a certain group is like, yeah, that's cool,
right?
But there's still a lot of...
It's still suppressed.
Absolutely.
Right.
100%.
In the 70s, the 80s, you have the AIDS epidemic, but you also have this satanic panic sort of situation that gets kind of wrapped into. So you have this call for kind of a religious awakening again, right? Then you have the 90s, which continues a little bit of the AIDS epidemic, but then you have a little bit more acceptance when it comes to, queer relationships. And then, 2000s into today. There was even in the documentary, there was a guy, an ad guy, and he worked for Subaru in the 90s, and he was like, we realized that lesbians loved Subaru, which I think is hysterical. Because it's true. And so he's like, lesbians love Subaru. He's like, so we wanted to make sure, he's like, we got influence from Leyendecker to give a nod to lesbians in our advertising. And so there's two Subarus back to back, whatever. And he's like, lesbians also love Xenon. Like, she was gorgeous, like very prominent. And so they have like on the license plate, one says Camp Out and the other one says Xenon Lover. And so like, if you're looking at it, you're like, oh, whatever, right? Like camping, Subarus, whatever. And then Xenon, I don't know what people like Xenon at the time. It's a really prominent show. But the lesbians are like, I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he talks about, he's like, I'm at a bus stop waiting for a bus, and the ad kind of is on the bus, and he's like, people just walk by it, whatever. And he's like, then I look and there's this lesbian couple and they point at it and they chuckle to each other and they get on the bus. And he's like, I knew I did my job.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what we wanted. Yeah.
It's a little interesting that you brought up about like the ebb and flow, because I'm for like leading up to the Depression of having like a slight acceptance. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like, I don't know, I'm drawing a similarity to today, where like early 2000s up until 2016, we'll say, we had this like kind of uprise of acceptance, a lot of popularity. And then we have 2016, where we have the Trump administration, things turn a little bit more conservative. Our economy kind of goes down. We're in the shitter right now, and so we have this more this flow back down, or ebb, I believe is what that part is.
Yeah.
Of like kind of acceptance with people shitting on drag readings and whatnot, and like all this other stuff. And I think that's an interesting mark, and to look at art through that lens as well today.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is you always have a progression forward. Yeah. Like you have an ebb and flow, but we still are progressing more.
Yeah,
and more
we're still
more,
far
right?
off better than we have been.
Right. And I think that, I mean, now is just I think the Trump era and the conservative, the right-wing kind of nature of things today, kind of the Trump being elected gave voice to a societal regression that we're seeing the effects of, right? And so we still have people that are combating it and people that, like, we're still moving forward. It's just we have to take that step back and then take those 2 steps forward again. You know what I mean? That's just really what it feels like. But to your point, I always love the ability to look at societal happenings and the way that art is influencing that, and the way that we're able to kind of express ourselves and really kind of find a cathartic moment in art, and the way that we're able to, and that's what art is, right? It's the ability to be cathartic and kind of symbolize a movement or a feeling, an expression, or all of these things. And so to your point, like, while JC Leyendecker, the Subaru ad, like those things, like there's these coded messagings in them, it's still, and this might be controversial, so whatever, but like I still think it's fascinating, and I think it's exciting when we're still able to do that. Like, yes, we shouldn't have to do that, and I don't think we need to anymore, you know what I mean? But I think it's kind of one of those things where when you recognize your culture in art or in the masses, and it's kind of like this one's just for you, I think no matter who you are, that's really exciting.
It's nice to be seen in that way, in a special way. Because, like, you should be accepted and seen for whomever you are, but, like, just to have, like, that, this one's for you, kid.
Right, right. It kind of is.
It feels better for yourself.
Right.
It's
and,
nice.
like, and not only that, but then I can say, oh, shit, like, one, this is for me, and someone sees me and recognizes me and did this because they know that I'm out there.
Yeah.
But also, that person is prominent enough in the world and is a part of my community that they get to make that choice. And they get to make that work that's now out there. And, like, that's incredible.
Yeah, because not everything should be coded for the white man.
Right. Correct. So I think J.D. Leyendecker and his work and his partnership with Charles A. Beach was something that was not necessarily novel, but it was something that I think unfortunately gets overlooked in history today, and I wanted to bring it back to prominence and kind of give the voice back to the story, because I think it has influenced a lot of things unknowingly.
Definitely.
So that's the way we kick off Pride Month.
Hell yeah.
Hell
what
yeah.
a 50-second episode.
Gay. So, thank you for sticking around. Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month. Hope you're going out, you're celebrating, you're doing all the things, you're an ally, you're a part of the community.
Be safe.
Be safe. But thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. WDYK _
podcast.
No, it's that now?
It's been that for
a long time. Yep, WDYK _ podcast on all social platforms. That's what it was. Anyway.
Yikes. It's only our 50-second episode.
This is why I am only the face. Devin doesn't give me a lot of control. No. So, and that's gay repression. And that's how we're ending this episode. I will talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Just kidding, Devin's great. Bye.